We will be learning about heredity and evolution, how we get certain characteristics and traits from our parents. Okay. And we learn this through plants on which experiments were carried out by a person called as Gregor Johann Mendel, who is also known as the father of genetics. So let's begin about learning how we originate, how do we get various characteristics like hair color, eyes, and various habits from our parents. Before we go to learn about heredity and evolution, we need to know a few terms and what do they mean. For example, on your screen we see we have three different terms: genetics, heredity, and variation. Now, when we are born with a certain characteristics, certain features. Okay, maybe the eyes look similar to our father. Hair is what our mother used to have when she was born. And certain features like how the baby looks, how the baby smiles, or various habits as the baby develops. And as a grown-up individual, how we look. Sometimes we look strikingly similar to one of our parents, maybe the father or the mother, uh, in the way we speak, or maybe just the facial um, look, how we look. We may look either like the father or mother, and various habits that we may have with respect to eating, walking, sleeping. We call it inherit, as in we get it from our parents. Okay, we don't ask for it, we get it from one of our parents, either from our mother or our father. This branch of study that actually deals with the characteristics that are transferred from our parents is called as genetics. Okay, and it has includes two parts, that is heredity and variation. Now, to put it in simple terms, what is heredity? Heredity would be like my father has black eyes, so I also have black eyes. Okay, now if both the mother and father have black eyes, then obviously I'm going to have black eyes. But if father has black eyes, mother has brown eyes, and I have got black eyes, which means I have got it from my father. That is heredity. Uh, Transmission of features or characteristics or traits, as we call them, from the parent to the offspring. Okay, this is heredity. What is variation? Let's say, as I discussed, mother has brown eyes, father has black eyes, and let's say I have a brother or a sister, but his or her eyes are not black, but they are brown. So we see that though we are related, we come from the same parents, we do not share the same characteristics. That is, I have black eyes, my brother or my sister has brown eyes. But the brown eyes came from whom? From the mother, right? Which I did not have. So what happens is there is a variation that is created. That variation means a difference, a change. Okay, wherein you see there is between the siblings. Siblings means the brothers and sisters. The offsprings of the parent are referred to as siblings. So there is a change seen between the two. That is what is called as variation. And variation can be seen in many different ways in the siblings or the offsprings. So, certain things you may like as per one parent, and your sibling or your brother or sister may not like something. One of you all may like to eat sweet foods, whereas the other one would like to enjoy pungent or spicy food. So we will see this variation in siblings. So in this chapter, we will learn as to how we get this characteristic traits or features from our parents, and how this variation comes about is, and how are we different from each other? When how are the offsprings different from each other, though they come from the same parent? So coming to the definitions, we see genetics. It is said it is a branch of science that deals with heredity and variation, and heredity occurs through inheritance of genes. We'll learn about what are genes as we proceed along. Right now, we just need to know the definition of these terms. Biological inheritance is what related to heredity. See, when we talk about inheritance, we can also refer to what we get from our parents in terms of land or any assets like gold. That is also terms of inheritance. That is why it is clearly or specifically mentioned over here as biological inheritance. We are only interested in biology over here. Heredity. It means the transmission of features, characteristic traits from one generation to the next generation. And variation is the differences among the individuals of a species or populations. That is not just between the siblings, but also in the various population. Though we may have a common ancestor, we do show variation. We show differences in various patterns of our behavior in terms of characteristics or features that we see in our day-to-day life. When we talk about inheritance, genetics, or variation, we have to remember one person whose contribution in this field was highly significant. Not to mention, it was immense. That person is Gregor Johann Mendel. He was a monk, monk meaning like a priest who was in his uh, chapel, you can say, the place where he was as a monk. And in his spare time, what he used to do was he was very much interested in biology, chemistry, physics, uh, was fascinated by nature and how there is variation in nature. Like there are some pink flowers, some have purple flowers, some have white flowers, some have red flowers, and so forth. So in his spare time, he used to tend to his garden, as work with his garden, and it so happened that he just tried to do some fun work, as well, not really serious work, which turned out to be quite serious for him as time went by, as years proceeded by. He, in his garden, apart from other things, was growing this garden pea, uh, whose scientific name is Pisum sativum. And it so happened that he got fascinated by them and he tried to work with them, uh, as in, try to find out if he can produce something different between them, just randomly. And his experiments provided the basis of genetics. At that time, there was no term as such called genetics. There would have been more people who may have worked on it, but his work was very well documented by him, of course. And basically, it was discovered just like around 100 to 200 years later after he passed away. Okay? But because it was well documented in his diary, which he kept, recording the observations that he made based on the experiments he carried out on this garden pea, that formed as the basis of learning about heredity and variation, which we broadly categorize as genetics. And that is why he is known as the father of genetics. Without his work, it would have probably taken more number of years, but his work formed as the basis of understanding because he spent around nearly a decade working, breeding such plants, trying to find out how characteristics are passed from the parent to the offspring, how different characteristics are produced, why are they produced, how are they produced, what brings about this change, and so forth. And it's not that he brought this plant and he started working on them just because he knew something would be going on with it. It was just growing in his garden, and he worked with it. And he worked at the. It was not like he was instantly successful, but through perseverance, hard work, and dedication, he was passionate about gardening. So, and so of course with his um, work on biology, nature basically say. So he brought about, you can say, a revolution in genetics. Of course, much after he passed away, his see, you have to understand that he worked in a very secluded area. Okay, that area was reserved for monks, wherein the monks are not allowed to interact with people. Okay, they spend most of their lives praying in prayer, and during their spare time, they some used to read books. So he had one more passion, that is to work in his garden and to try out various things. Basically, he brought forth his creativity and imagination. Both. Moving forward from Gregor Mendel, we go to what all he did. So Mendel and his work on inheritance. So he worked, as we said, on the garden P, and he performed a series of these experiments for several long years, from 1856 to 1863. That's a long time, and that allows for a lot of experiments to be carried out. Okay. In his experiments, he found the principles based on which it could be predicted how characters or can say traits get passed on from or get inherited from the parent to the offspring, and thus came about the laws of Mendelian inheritance. And based on his work, there are three laws. We'll come across these three laws, and these three laws till today are followed. Okay, because they are like fundamental. It's like how our ABC is based on which is our English language. The way we form words and sentences and a letter. Based on his work, now a lot of progress has been made in the field of genetics. So now the question arises as to why did Mendel choose a pea plant? Now, as I said before, he did not handpick the pea plant. It just so happened that for a number of reasons, he happened to find the pea plant to be the right choice to work with, to understand. See, at that you have to understand at that point of time, he did not know it is genetics, he did not know it is heredity. He was only interested in the variation part of it. Why are things different? Why are they different? Why is there a tall plant and a short plant, or what we call as a dwarf plant? Why are there yellow flowers or green flowers? Why are there round seeds or wrinkled seeds? You see, this variation is what intrigued him, is what fascinated him to conduct these experiments and see how far he could go with these experiments and discover more things, something different. Now, for example, a pea plant has several contrasting characters like height, flower color, seed color, and shape. And he began experimenting with all such characteristics. Basically, he worked with seven of them to be precise, and found out the reason for the variation in each of these characteristics. What he did was he self-pollinated this plant, pea plant, but before that he cross-pollinated them. Now, self-pollination of pea plants happens in nature. That means by itself it undergoes self-pollination and not cross-pollination. Cross-pollination is where the male gamete or the male part, okay, male germ cell is transferred from one plant to another to the female part of another plant. To put it in very simple terms, okay, in self-pollination, the male gamete or the male germ cell is transferred between the same plant. That is, it is transferred from the male part of the plant to the female part of the same plant. Got it? So it allows fusion of the male germ cell with the female germ cell or male gamete with the female gamete within the same plant. That is self-pollination. That is what was happening in nature. Naturally, that was happening in a pea plant. What he did was he first carried out a cross-pollination wherein he artificially got the male gamete or the male germ cell from one plant and he transferred it to the uh, female part of another plant. That was cross-pollination. And later on, he allowed self-pollination also to have occurred. So, why this self-pollinated plant in nature helped him is because it allowed him, as we proceed further, we'll come to know, it allowed Mendel to know when a process gave what result. As in, he knew very well, okay, this was now I have carried out cross pollination and this has given me this result. And when self pollination occurred, it gave him another result altogether. Okay? So he knew exactly when that happened. So one of these characteristics was that it was self pollinated in nature. The next characteristic was cross pollination was easy. Sometimes cross pollination is very uh, difficult. Scientifically speaking, we have learned about cross pollination, and it is the transfer of pollen from the male reproductive organ of the plant, that is the anther, okay, of one plant to the female reproductive organ, which is the stigma. From the stigma, it goes to style, finally to the ovary of another plant. So remember, it is a transfer of pollen which contains the male gametes or the male germ cells, okay, from the anther where it originates to the stigma of another uh, plant. Stigma is part of the female reproductive organ of the plant. So it is stigma, style, and ovary. Now, it is transferred to the stigma of another plant. That is what is cross pollination. In case of self pollination, scientifically speaking, it is the pollen of that plant is transferred to from the anther of that plant to the stigma of the same plant. That is self pollination. Okay, and so for cross pollination, it is very important that insects are there, winds are there. These are the agents of pollination. So he carried out cross pollination artificially. That is, made sure that he himself transferred. He didn't depend on nature, some insects or some wind to carry out this pollination. By nature, it was happening by itself. That means by nature, it was happening within the same plant. But he artificially carried out pollination wherein he transferred the pollen from the anther of plant A to the stigma of plant B. That is cross pollination between two different plants. When the anther, when the pollen grain is transferred from the anther to the stigma of the same plant, then it is called self pollination. So here he found that cross pollination is easy to be done artificially, that is by himself. Next, he also found that pea plant has a very short lifespan. Now you may say, why is that important? Why is it necessary that isn't it a bad thing to have a short lifespan? For genetics, we have to look for transmission of characteristics. Okay, sometimes we do not see one characteristic being transmitted to one generation. That means the immediate generation. That means the offspring. Let's take human example. Okay, now let's go back to your grandparents. Your grandparents gave birth to your parents. That would be probably like 50, 60 years ago. And now your parents have given birth to you. That would be around 14, 15 years ago. So how long is that period to really for somebody to really observe? See, somebody needs to observe the characteristics being transmitted from one generation to another to a third generation. Sometimes you will notice that there are certain characteristics you possess which your grandfather possessed, but your parents do not have it. So if we want to understand this characteristic, we need to observe many such generations to conclude or to arrive at a conclusion or a decision as to what exactly is happening. We can't say, okay, it's happening. It was with my grandparents. It's there in me, and I've concluded. No, these experiments, this basis of learning genetics or heredity, understanding heredity and variation, involves studying a number of generations. And in one person's lifespan, if we are going to study that, we do not have a lifespan that really encompasses 4 or 5 generations. We also have a limited lifespan. So in this case, if we are going to study a particular specimen, like in this case the garden pea, if it has got a short lifespan, it allows us to carry a number of experiments within a short span of time. See, he carried out this experiment over 7 to 8 years. Now imagine if one garden pea took like 10 years to grow. Would he have been successful? We would have not been even discussing today this thing about him. So it has a short lifespan, and that is why they work even with mice, because it has a short lifespan. Okay, so when you have a short lifespan, it means that you also reproduce faster. You have to reproduce faster, because otherwise you become extinct. You will die off. So this short lifespan acted as a boon for him, which allowed him to work with many generations. We may just learn about maybe first generation and maximum second generation in this chapter, but he carried out experiments with multiple generations, and the only thing that helped him to carry out experiments on multiple generations is the short lifespan, which allowed faster reproduction. Means more offsprings were produced. Offsprings were produced. Okay? Let's see what are the more characteristics. It was easy to cultivate, so easy to grow. It is important that you need. It has to be easy to grow. Means it should not require a particular temperature. It should not require a lot of care. It should, of course, their care is required, but not like some plants are difficult to grow. Okay, they need like so much of fertilizer. They need to be protected from insects, rodents, and so forth. In case of uh, garden pea plant, it is fairly easy to grow them. So he did not worry about growing them. They were easily grown. That is very, very important if you want to work with particulars. So you see, these are the what do you say, characteristics which help them to help Mendel to work and produce such results. Now, coming to his experiment, what exactly did Mendel do that helped him to get such results? We'll see what is Mendel's experiment now. On your screen, you have a look. There is a tall plant, there is a short plant. Now we are discussing only about the garden pea plant here. This is his experiment. He carried out a cross between them. Now this is a cross pollination. And he found what he got were four tall plants. Okay, for simplicity's sake, we'll just take it as we see it on our screen here. Four tall plants. All plants were tall. And this next generation we call it as the offspring, and it is referred to as F1. F1 is filial one or first generation. Down here we have a look. What he did was he took this one plant itself, only one. Here you may see two, that is to show you that it is actually selfing. Selfing meaning self-pollination being carried out. So just to make it easier for you to understand, it is shown as two plants. Basically, he just took one plant and he carried out self-pollination. Here, in this case, in the first case, he took the pollen from the anther of this plant and transferred it to the stigma of this dwarf or short plant. The results were all of them were tall offsprings or tall plants. Then he took one of this tall plant and he carried out self-pollination. And what he found amazed him because he expected all of them to be tall, but in fact what happened was three of them were tall and one of them was short. So he found in his experiments 75% were tall plants, that was fine, but 25% was short or dwarf. He didn't understand from where the dwarf came in the first instance, because if both the parents are tall, how can offspring be short? For first, he thought maybe something went wrong, or maybe there is a defect. That is why we got a dwarf plant. But as he carried out the same experiments, see, it is important to arrive at a conclusion in the science. You need to have repeated observations. Repeated observations giving the same results, only then you can conclude that so and so is the result or so and so is the conclusion. Otherwise, no, the results have to be successfully replicated or reproduced in the same fashion. That is when we say that, okay, this is really the answer to this. So in this case, we see it over here just once, but actually it was repeated a number of times. And again, the same result came forth. So what were Mendel's findings in this? Mendel found that the first generation consisted of all tall plants, which we have seen. In the second half of the experiment, where he self-pollinated the tall plants, okay, that is the F1 generation, he found that in the next generation, after carrying out self-pollination, 75% were tall and 25% were short. Now, from this observation, what did Mendel conclude? Now, this is the important part. From this, he concluded one thing, that when he carried out the experiment between the tall plants, the characteristic or the trait, as we call, or the feature of this dwarf plant was not lost as he first assumed, but it was hidden. And when he carried out self pollination, that hidden part got expressed in small quantity, of course, but it got expressed, which showed that it did possess that characteristic. But this characteristic of this tall plant uh, dominated or overpowered, or you can say superseded over this dwarf plant, as a result of which mostly only the tall plant got expressed, or the tall plant was observed. Okay, so this trait for this short plant remained in the F1 generation but was not expressed. Only when the cell pollination was carried out, this was. That brings us to the topic of dominant and recessive characteristics. What are dominant and recessive characteristics or traits? In our garden pea plant, what was dominant? The tall plant. Why we call it dominant? Because both dominant and both tall and dwarf plant were the parents. So there should have been an equal amount of dwarf as well as tall plants. But what we noticed was they were all tall plants, which means that the tall plants somehow suppressed the expression or manifestation of the short or dwarf plants, and they could not be expressed, or they could not be seen at all. What was seen was only the were only the tall plants. So dominant traits that get expressed in the offspring are referred to as dominant. Okay, and it takes over other inherited trait. Example is of the tall dominant, and the recessive, whatever is not dominant, we refer to it as recessive. Okay, traits that remain hidden or dominated by a dominant trait, for example, is the dwarf plant in a garden, dwarf nature of the garden pea plant. I forgot to show you in the previous slide. If you notice, there was a ear lobe. Okay, and in that ear lobe, you see one of most of our ear lobes are like free. You can just move this ear lobe over here. I'm showing you rightly, I guess. Yeah. So this is a free ear lobe, and this is the dominant type. But for some, it is attached. Okay, over here, and you can't kind of move it this way. It is attached to the skin of the face out here. I hope I'm showing you correctly here. Okay, so mine is free, which means I've got the dominant characteristic. Most of us do have the dominant. So this is a trait that gets expressed in most human beings, but in some cases it is kind of fused with yeah, it's nothing abnormal. It is just that the recessive trait is expressed. Does that mean I will also have? Possibly, yes. I may also possess the recessive trait, but it is not expressed within me. Okay. When we speak about traits, we come to an important part in understanding about developmental genetics and cell biology. Coming to humans, let us try to understand these traits from the human point of view. See, we are born as a result uh, of a yes, union between our father and the mother. That means the sexual reproduction results in an offspring in case of humans. And in this sexual reproduction, we get 50% from our father, 50% from our mother. Okay, we get half our characteristics from our father, half from our mother. But sometimes 50% of it, which actually encompasses a whole set from our father and a whole set. That means for each and every characteristics that we possess, we get that 100% from our father. I'll just put it in a very simple way. let's say all our characteristics are there, and these all characteristics, we have characteristics for our fingers, whether they are tall or short, whether they have skin color, whether they are brown complexion, black complexion, white complexion, hair color, which could be brown, black, white, gray color, so forth. Eyes, which could be black, brown, and blue, and some other colors. Then you may have other characteristics, for example, whether your face is round or long or square shaped. The characteristics that your father possesses, all of it will be transferred to you. All of it is present within you. Similarly, all of the characteristics possessed by your mother are also transferred to you. Does that mean you get 100%, you look 100%, you look like a carbon copy or a clone of your father or your mother? Wrong. You have your own identity. Why? Is because though your father has given you all whatever he's made up of, and your mother has given you whatever she's made up of, all those characteristics are what you can say not turned on in you. Okay? Because you're receiving the same set from your father as well as your mother. Your father has eyes and your mother has eyes. Your father has brown eyes. Let's say your mother has got blue eyes. Does that mean you have a mixture of brown and blue, black and blue eyes, or brown and blue eyes? No, you don't. Either you will have black eyes from your father or you will have blue eyes from your mother. So then, if we say, let's say you have blue eyes from your mother, but I just said that you receive whatever your father possesses, and your father has got black eyes. Yes, you have received everything from your father, but that particular trait, feature, or characteristic has not been switched on in you. That is what we call as a gene. That gene has not been switched on. It is not making its product. Its product is a protein that allows you to have black eyes. Instead, you have received for that particular gene. Gene is for the eye color. That gene you have also received from your mother. But in your case, since you have blue eyes, it shows that the gene for the blue color received from your mother has been switched on. You getting this? So in this way, we are made up. That carries out a variation. So we look partly like our father, partly like our mother. Certain characteristics we get from our father, certain characteristics we get from our mother. And then again, if you notice, if we have children, okay, you have blue eyes from your mother, and later on, your offspring may have black eyes. Let's say your husband or your wife also has blue eyes, but both having blue eyes, your child has now got black eyes. That could be from your father because you still possess that gene, and it could so happen that that gene was passed on to your offspring by you, and that got switched on in your offspring. So that would explain the fact that though both you and your husband or your wife had blue eyes, why did your offspring have a different eye color altogether? Okay, so that shows you certain characteristics are switched on and certain characteristics are switched off, or certain characteristics are expressed and certain characteristics are not expressed. What is expressed becomes the dominant characteristic, as we have seen in the definition. Now, coming why have I explained all this thing about genes and so forth? We'll come to the part. See, now we are made up of cells. Cells make up tissues, and tissues make up organs. Now, cells, each cell has got a brain, and that brain is called as the nucleus. And in that nucleus, you have the genetic material, the material that is responsible for making who you are. Each cell has got that. Now, the genetic material is composed of something we call as DNA, or deoxyribonucleic acid. Short segments of that DNA make up something we call as genes, and many genes together make up what we call as chromosomes. Okay, so in this diagram that you may see, you see there is a cell. The cell has got, you know, a central part in between. That is the nucleus, and that nucleus has got chromosome. Now this is we are referring to just the humans. So humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes. That means there are a total of 46 chromosomes, and each chromosome is made up of many genes, and these genes are nothing but short segments of DNA. Okay, this is a helical structure. Helical structure means it's just intertwined between each other. Okay, and made up of chemical bases. So during reproduction, male and female sex cells, we call them sex cells, the germ cells or the gametes, which are responsible um, for giving us that 50% from our father and 50% from our mother. So during this reproduction, male and female sex cells combine to form the zygote, one cell. Okay, so 50% from father, 50% from mother, total adds up to become 100%. That is who we are. So when we look to reproduce, we give only 50% of ourselves. Male and female sex cells are haploid, so having half the number. We are, as individuals, we are diploid. Okay, that is 100%. So we have received 50% from our father, 50% from our mother. But when we look to reproduce, we give only half of it. So that is haploid. We call it as haploid. Okay. The specialized male sex cells are called as sperm cells, and in case of female, it is called as an egg. Now, both the sperm, as we call it, and the egg has got 22 autosomes, we call it, and one sex chromosome. The sex chromosome will be either X or Y chromosome. See, males are made up of X chromosomes and Y chromosome. Okay, females are only X chromosome. That means they receive X chromosome from father, X chromosome from mother. Mother always possesses only X chromosome, so she will have two X chromosomes. So she can give, since she gives 50%, she can donate just X chromosome. Okay. Whereas for the father, he can donate either the X chromosome or the Y chromosome, because that's a pair together, right? So he can only give 50%. So in that 50%, it can be either X chromosome or Y chromosome. If he gives X chromosome in the reproduction, it will result in a girl. If he gives Y chromosome, then it will result in a boy. So if you are a girl, that means your father has donated X chromosome. And if you are a boy, it means your father donated Y chromosome. So it is dependent on the father and not the mother if you are a boy or a girl. We'll learn about this in sex determination when we move further in this chapter. For now, you just need to remember all cells in the body, when we talk about humans, are diploid in nature. Okay, because chromosomes exist in pairs. Pairs, why? Because 50% comes from father, 50% comes from mother. Totally, we have got 46 chromosomes. Thanks to 23 pairs, thanks to 23 chromosomes from father, 23 chromosomes from mother. That is why we call it 23 pairs, a total of 46 chromosomes. Okay, so we have read. So what are autosomes and sex chromosomes? See, sex chromosomes are what decides whether you will be a male or a female. And There are other 22 chromosomes which have other characters. We refer to them as autosomes, which are not involved in deciding whether you will be a boy or a girl. Those are called as autosomes. Learning about important terms, chromosomes. Chromosomes are long thread-like. This is a chromosome that we can see. See, this is a how the chromosomes will look like. They are at the fuse stage. This is the metaphase stage. You don't have to learn about all that. But these are two pairs of chromosomes together. Long thread-like are present in the nucleus of cell, which contain hereditary information of the cell in the form of genes. Then you have DNA. Okay, is a chemical in the chromosome. DNA is a chemical in the chromosome which carries the traits in the form of a coded form. So there are these bases. The combination of these bases gives a combination. When this bases combine, different combination is like a puzzle. Different combination produce different results. So these are bases which combine in different patterns, and when they are read, they give different results or different messages or different proteins, okay, which result in a different product altogether. Then you have a gene, which is part of the chromosome, and each gene controls a specific function, a specific trait. Coming to autosomes and sex chromosomes, I've just told you autosomes. These are other than sex chromosomes, means they are not involved in deciding whether you will be a male or a female, but they are nevertheless very important because they have other characteristics, okay, which are also important other apart from deciding whether you will be a male or a female. Sex chromosomes are different. In females it is, as I told you, mentioned over here, both are X chromosomes, and in case of males it is X and Y chromosome. The rest are all autosomes. Haploid and diploid cells. Diploid cells with two complete cells of chromosome, and haploid contains cells with just a single set of chromosome. Haploid state is seen mostly when, in case of the sperms and in case of the eggs. When the sperm fuses with the egg to form a zygote, the zygote is diploid in nature, containing two pairs of chromosome, complete set. What are homologous chromosomes? We have something called as homologous chromosomes and heterologous chromosomes. Now, homologous chromosomes, as you see in this diagram, okay, now they have the same size and shape, okay, and the genes that are present on these chromosomes are the same, but they come from different parents. So, if we get gene 1, say, coming from a mother, gene 1 from a father will also possess the same characteristics, coding for the same characteristics. That means, let's say gene 1 codes for eye color, height of the person, and let's say it also codes for hair color in mother. Then gene 1 for father will also code for the same thing, eye color, then how tall you are, and for the hair color. Okay, so they are of the same size, same shape, possess the same codes, code for the same characteristic, not possess the same characteristic, but code for the same characteristics. These are called homologous pair of chromosome. Coming from the mother, father, when it comes from the father, it is called as paternal chromosome. When it comes from mother, it is referred to as maternal chromosome. Okay, and if you notice over here, they kind of replicate. They are not joining together, but they are replicating. You see, and you have something called as sister chromatids. You call when they are fused together, they are called as sister chromatids. These are replicated. Replication means one becomes two, and it's like a clone that is formed over here. And in this case, so this is maternal chromosome getting replicated, and this is paternal chromosome getting replicated. So these are one maternal chromosome, one paternal chromosome that pairing up with each other inside a cell. So homologous regions code for the same gene. Coming to heterologous chromosome, this is opposite of homologous chromosome. So they differ in size, shape and function. They do not belong to the same pair at all.